crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you for joining us tonight. Looking forward to our conversation today. If you are a motorcycle person, know someone who is, and you need to know more about your rights or concerned about them, give them a call. Let them know. That's our topic of conversation tonight, motorcycles and knowing your rights and how to protect yourselves and those you love. We're going to talk about that on the way. First, though, some ground rules of how you can be a part of our conversation, because it is always better whenever you are involved in the process. You'll see ways you can call, text, email at the bottom of your screen, 844-LAW-TALK. Regardless, that's the number you need to know and memorize. Have it burn into your brain. 844-LAW-TALK is the number to know. Always to get in touch with Hollis Wright during the show or even after. And also, Hollis Wright makes available attorneys each and every Sunday night that are standing by live. That's a free, all-fair, and confidential conversation you can have with an actual attorney. Just pick up the phone and give them a call. Leading our conversation, he is the managing partner of Hollis Wright, and he is quite the motorcycle enthusiast himself. Josh Wright, good
Absolutely.
to see you.
I even have my motorcycle license. How about that?
And you said, so like whenever you were younger, the younger Josh Wright was pretty active on two wheels.
Yeah, I've decided over the years that I need to focus on just driving a car.
Right.
So I do less in the motorcycle realm. But, you know, we do a lot of motorcycle cases at Hollis Wright. In fact, I just got done with a case that took several years. And these are interesting cases. There are 35 million motorcycles on the road in the United States. And a motorcyclist is 35 to 40% more likely to have an event. It may not be a catastrophic event, but an event that could cause or contribute to an accident. So when we evaluate these cases, it requires an expertise that's unique and different to a traditional lawyer that does car accident cases. And so we're happy to have this specialty, if you will, that we work on.
Yeah. There is nothing quite like that experience, you know, of you know, just being out there and, you know, just riding. There is something about it. And there are, and I have friends, and you probably do too, folks are passionate about riding and their motorcycles and their motorcycle clubs and all of that. I mean, it really does seem to tap in with something in us because folks are excited and really interested in it.
It's almost like how politics sometimes taps into people.
Right.
People have the freedom of being a motorcyclist, and you know, I'm gonna do it my way. I don't want to use a helmet, for example. That's a big issue throughout the United States, and the federal government's tried to step in and mandate some things, and the states have kind of maintained their space there where they're able to tell you whether you can or cannot wear a helmet and under what circumstances you can. And so it's really kind of a freedoms issue, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. The reality is that as we operate our motor vehicles and as tractor trailers operate, motorcyclists are also there, and they're to be as protected as just as anyone else is. So a lot of times we work our way into these cases and have to evaluate them. You know, it is what it is. Motorcyclists are 35 to 40% more likely to have an event. So we try and do the best thing we can to evaluate these cases for them.
You are a young fella, but you have tried, and your firm has been involved in thousands of cases. So tell me, what is the difference in trying a case, a vehicle, a four-wheel vehicle versus the two-wheel motorcycle variety?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And let me describe it this way. Size of a motorcycle versus a vehicle, visibility between a motorcycle and a vehicle, stopping distance, and the mechanism that you use to stop and the process you use to stop are a couple things. There are a lot of them. Those are just a couple I'd highlight that are unique and different in these cases. Let me give a good example. You know, we have had cases over the years and several most recently where trying to explain to a jury that a motorcyclist in traffic does not stop the same way that you and I do in an automobile, where we may lock our brakes up. A motorcyclist, they're taught from the start of taking their motorcycle classes and getting licensed, they're taught avoidance is your primary mechanism to resolve an issue in front of you, as opposed to locking your brakes up. Why? You lock your brakes up, you can lay your bike down you can be hit from behind. So a lot of times, having to explain to a jury, for example, why a motorcyclist would take avoidance as their first defense mechanism, if you will, in the moment where there's a potential accident or an impediment in front of them, versus locking their brakes up like a regular automobile would, you're required to explain that. And in context, help the jury understand why a motorcyclist does it just a little bit different. Those are just a handful of examples, but the reality is a lot of times that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an avoidance technique as opposed to locking your brakes up first.
And I think it's important that right at the outset we kind of make this precursor because this reminds me of our conversations with bicyclists, and they have as much right to the road as any vehicle, and the same is true with motorcycles. You know, I mean, I not only do they have as much right to the road, really, as drivers in cars, we should look out for them because of the cause of. I mean, a small margin of error with them is real small.
Yeah, so, you know, Alabama has a rules of the road for all, you know, motorized vehicle operators, which includes both automobiles, tractor trailers, box trucks, and motorcyclists. And then the motorcyclists have some additional rules and protections built into our statutes. For example, that allow them to ride side by side or staggered in a single lane as long as they're not an impediment to another lane. And there are a series of other things that are there to help protect them. But I will tell you this, of all the cases that I have seen over the years, the vast majority of the cases, and we'll talk later after we get through the break, we'll talk about road conditions that contribute to accidents and those types of things. But visibility and lack of visibility is the key to the vast majority of the cases that we handle. And so, although there are protections built into the statutes for motorcyclists, and although those motorcyclists have to use the same rules of the road that you and I do, the reality is that visibility is a major issue that we're always dealing with. Because motorcyclists are just not nearly as visible as an automobile is. And I know when we come back from break, because we're getting ready to go to break, I do want to talk a little bit about how you properly evaluate one of these cases, because it doesn't just involve the accident. It may involve the helmet, road conditions, mechanical issues, those types of things. And those are things you got to do as a lawyer to properly and fully and completely evaluate a claim for a motorcyclist.
All right, perfect opportunity for us to step aside our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder to you to join our conversation. That information at the bottom of your screen. 844 Law Talk is really the number you need to know. Also, Hollis Wright, very active on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Everywhere you are on social media, Hollis Wright is there, and they are a great follow for you. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
That we would be able to use the resources of the many lawyers we have at this law firm to create a plan that had a lasting impact that also gave back to the community at the same time. And I think we've done just that with the attorneys.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight, talking all about motorcycles and motorcycle accidents, how to protect yourself and your rights on the road. We'd love to have you join our conversation. That information at the bottom of your screen here with Josh Wright, managing partner of Hollis Wright. We touch on this every now and then, but I think it's important to do so. Attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live, actual attorneys standing by as we speak.
Yeah, and you know that's one of the things that's unique about our show compared to some of the other shows. There's some great shows out there. We are a confidential off-air conversation with a lawyer. We felt like that was a better model, if you will, to make sure that people had an opportunity to speak with a lawyer about a legal-related issue, even if their legal-related issue is not, for example, motorcycles today. But it relates to a car accident or the need for a will or some domestic violence related issue. They can contact us, and if we're not able to field the question directly, we'll get them to someone. But when they call, they text, they email, they hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, they're going to get an immediate response from a lawyer because we are here to be able to answer those questions for them.
Neat opportunity, and I know a lot of folks take advantage of that. Let's get back to our conversation talking about motorcycle accidents. You talked a little about how they are different, but how is evaluating whether you have a case if you're operating a motorcycle versus a car or a truck, how are they different and how is that unique?
Yeah, they really are different. They're substantially different. You've got to recognize that, as we talked about earlier, visibility is a major component to a lot of these accidents where, someone in an automobile caused an accident with a motorcyclist and said, I'm sorry, I just did not see this person. So visibility is always an issue. But in order to be a real motorcycle attorney that evaluates and considers motorcycle cases, to properly represent those clients, you have to evaluate the full circumstances of an accident. Let me give you just a good example. We've had cases in the past where visibility is the sole issue related to the motorcyclist. However, there are certain motorcycle technologies now where you may see, for example, double lights blinking when they approach you.
Yeah.
Well, there are design-related claims that we also evaluate to determine whether or not the vintage of the motorcycle the person was on, if visibility is an issue, whether that design characteristic should have been involved in that motorcycle that they were operating. Because it would have made it more visible, could have contributed to the accident not happening. Road conditions are always a major issue. You think about potholes that you and I run over all the time, and every once in a while it will cause damage to a tire. A pothole for a motorcyclist can be catastrophic, depending on whether they're paying attention, how big the pothole is, and it's not just that. It can be everything from curbs that are not designed consistent with the design specifications, roads that are not designed to the consistent Muncie standard, which is the standard that roads are supposed to be designed to in Alabama. So those are a couple things that have to be evaluated. Another great example is in a lot of these cases, we're evaluating whether or not the helmet meets specifications that are required in order to be able to be certified as a helmet that one can wear that is safe. Now, every helmet is not going to resolve a major catastrophic injury in every accident. Some accidents, the velocities and the speed and the physics of the accident are so significant that a helmet would not have made a major difference. However, there are times when evaluating whether or not the helmet met specifications is critically important in these cases. So you can imagine just those examples of visibility to design of the motorcycle, to road work, to helmets. Those are all things that have to be evaluated that are unique and different to what you and I would do if we were evaluating a typical car accident case.
Is your advice different if you've been involved in an accident and you are on a motorcycle? Is your advice to what to do, the steps to take if you're involved in an accident, here's what you need to do? Is that advice different if you're riding a motorcycle versus in a car?
Yeah, I think, and I think what you're driving at is, if you've been in a motorcycle accident, is the advice different for how that person should preserve evidence and those types of things compared to an automobile accident? I think the advice would be really similar. One thing that is generally unique, though, in a motorcycle accident compared to that of an automobile accident is a lot of the injuries with a motorcyclist are significant and catastrophic, right? So a lot of times the individual is not capable at the scene of being able to manage the scene, document through video, through pictures, gather the information necessary to protect yourself. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times these accidents are a lot more significant with a motorcyclist where, they're in the hospital and the reality is that there was no one there to protect the scene, no one there to evaluate the scene. And so what I would recommend is, definitely in a motorcycle case, getting an attorney involved early and immediate is super important to make sure that things like skid marks, witnesses, officers are all properly preserved so that there is sufficient information to have the case fully and completely evaluated. And the reality is, you can go to a lawyer with a contingency fee and pay nothing to have that person evaluate the case. Even if they come to you eventually and say, hey, David, I'm sorry, but this is your fault. This is not an accident case that we can pursue. It's not going to cost you anything to do that, but you want to be able to have the same quality of legal service that the defense bar would have if you're a motorcyclist involved in an accident, to get to a lawyer quickly.
Good stuff. Question we've got here, and we love getting questions from you, so keep sending those in, please. What about the age requirements? Who can operate a motorcycle in the state of Alabama?
Yeah, so it's different. Each state's a little different. In Alabama, you can operate certain motorcycles at age 14. Then there are certain restrictions for Class M motorcycle certifications when you're 16 years old. So it's kind of a complex law. The reality is there are certain motorcyclists that are able to operate when you turn 14, but the vast majority of those that are going to be on the street riding street-related bikes are going to be 16 years old.
Okay. Let's get this after the break. A question here about motorcycle helmets. What is required here?
Yep.
It seems like anywhere you go, or any state, they kind of do it different.
We could do a whole show on this,
right,
about the politics involved in whether someone wants to wear a motorcycle helmet or they don't,
right,
and how motorcycle helmets get certified throughout various states and across the country.
Let's jump into that.
Yep.
Let's take our second and final break of the evening right here. Coming back, our final segment of the attorneys. So if you have a question or you want to speak with an attorney from Hollis, Wright, you got just a few minutes to do so. We are stepping aside. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Drew McNutt with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. We often get asked what happens if someone is injured by a motorist who doesn't have any insurance coverage. In tonight's Legal 411, we will address uninsured motorist coverage. Under Alabama law, all automobile policies issued must provide uninsured motorist coverage unless the name insured rejects the coverage in writing. If you purchase this coverage and you are injured by an uninsured driver, you can make a claim against your own insurance company to compensate you for the injuries caused by an uninsured or underinsured driver. While liability insurance is required by state law, it is estimated that over 20% of the motorists in Alabama do not have any coverage at all. Uninsured motorist coverage provides you with the ability to protect yourself and your family in the event you are injured or killed by one of these uninsured drivers. If you are concerned about whether you're covered, I recommend that you check your declarations page or contact your insurance agent to discuss your coverage options. If you do not have uninsured motorist coverage, consider adding it. And if you do have it, discuss increasing your limits. Oftentimes, you can purchase hundreds of thousands in coverage for less than $100 a year. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on the real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13.
Welcome back in. Final segment here of the attorneys. About 8 minutes remaining in the show. So if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with an attorney from Hollis, Wright, you need to get on the phone and give them a call, because the clock is ticking, as they say. So here talking with Josh Wright, managing partner, Hollis Wright, all about motorcycles tonight. What is the deal with helmets? Because it seems like every neighboring state does it different. There's no uniformity, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so, there are, I think at last count, there are 3 states that do not require a motorcyclist to use a helmet at all, unless they want to. There are 27 states that have certain requirements where you mandatorily have to wear a helmet. And then there are 20 states where they have the laws set up where there are certain circumstances where you have to wear them. For example, if you're a young rider under the age of 21, or you have only had your license for a year, you got to wear a helmet. And then after that, it's your choice if you want to wear a helmet. It's across the board, and we could do a whole show on helmets because we do a lot of helmet litigation where we're looking at the design specifications of a helmet to determine whether or not it was properly certified and met the expectations of a regular consumer as it relates to the ability to protect someone. But we could do a whole show on that. We could also do a whole show on the politics of it. Really what it comes down to at the end of the day, it comes down to a freedom of choice. And as we mentioned at the start of the show, there's some level of freedom when you ride a motorcycle, and people don't like those rights taken away because it's kind of their right to do it. Right. And look, I respect that. I do. I'm glad Alabama has a helmet law, though, and I think that's wise. But there are still some states where you don't have to have a helmet. Yeah.
Folks get touchy whenever you fool with their civil liberties.
Well,
we found that out here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and these helmet manufacturers, they play a major role in the motorcycle industry because there are certain performance requirements in Alabama, for example, related to the design of a helmet. If someone wants to sell a helmet in our state, generally they've got to send it to the Department of Public Safety, and they evaluate it. It's got to meet certain chin strap and insulation and hard coat design characteristics. There has to be some level of testing that's done on those helmets, so they're certified to be able to be used in Alabama and sold in Alabama. But a lot of times we're evaluating a helmet that did not perform well. Right. I can think of a recent case at Talladega Motor Speedway where someone was testing a motorcycle and there was a design issue associated with the helmet where there was helmet litigation that amounted to that. So it's a very interesting component to the whole motorcycle litigation, and it has to be evaluated to make sure that you properly protect people's rights.
5 minutes remaining. You want to do a little speed round here?
Sure.
I'm going to fire away. Let's see how many we can get to here. Question that we've got from a viewer here. I was a passenger on a motorcycle. I was injured in a crash due to the negligent driving of the operator. Yeah. Can I bring a lawsuit for my injuries?
The general answer is yes, under most circumstances. There are some level of restrictions, but I would highly recommend they get that evaluated by an attorney. For the most part, if your driver was negligent, there are some ways you can bring your claim. If they were wanton, you clearly can bring your claim, but there's some ways around those rules that will protect the occupant.
On the subject matter of a helmet, a question here about helmets. I was injured in a motorcycle accident, but I wasn't wearing a helmet. Can I still recover damages from the driver? Yeah,
so the answer generally to that, it's a good question, is yes. As long as the injury you are claiming is not a brain injury related event, right? So just because you didn't have a helmet on, you can still argue that the other driver that caused that accident is at fault. But if you're claiming a brain injury, there's going to be a significant defense that other driver would have that had you worn a helmet, you may not have had this injury. I'm not saying you couldn't still pursue that claim, but generally helmet a lack of a helmet is not going to prevent you from bringing a negligence claim unless you're trying to argue that the significance of your injury is related to some type of brain-related issue.
Good point. All right, a question here about statute of limitations. How long do I have after my accident to file my motorcycle injury case?
So that is very common with car accidents, which is 2 years.
Okay.
But the one thing I would highly recommend if someone is going to have a case evaluated is do not wait to have the case evaluated. Related to motorcycles, you want to make sure you've got an attorney on your side on the ground as quick as you can evaluating these cases, because they can do it for free to at least come back to you and say, hey, you either have a case or you don't have a case.
Having done a few hundred of these shows, the advice, I would bet you've never heard someone say, dang, I hired an attorney too quick. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think lawyers sometimes get a bad rap for, trying to jump into a case quickly, but we're not jumping into a case quickly for the sake of having the case. We're jumping into it quickly because we've been retained by somebody and the case needs to be properly evaluated. The problem is things go away, things are lost, testimony's lost, evidence is lost.
Memory's
so you
lost.
want to lock it down quickly.
Yeah. Another question we've got here, this is about insurance. If I didn't have insurance on my motorcycle, can I still file a claim against another driver if they were at fault?
The answer is yes. Just because you do not have insurance, now you could be cited by the Department of Public Safety for not having insurance in that accident, but you can still pursue a claim against the party that was negligent and that caused the accident, even if you do not have insurance. But remember, and we've had a lot of shows on this, there's a mandatory requirement that people carry insurance in Alabama. Mm-hmm. That applies not just to automobiles, but it also applies to motorcycles.
All right, you did good, Josh. We got through quite a few.
We did.
A minute and a half remaining. Yep. I want to give you time for a final thought. So what would you leave our viewers with tonight?
Yeah, so, one of the things that we also have to evaluate as lawyers in the motorcycle realm is whether or not someone has uninsured motorist coverage. We could do an entire show on uninsured motorist coverage. Let me just say this. If you're involved in an accident and the person that caused the accident either does not have sufficient insurance or has no insurance at all, don't give up. You want to get your claim to an attorney to evaluate whether or not your own personal uninsured motorist coverage may protect you in those moments. And it's rainy day coverage that protects people in those circumstances when someone's either underinsured or not insured at all. So, get to a lawyer, let them fully and completely evaluate the case. And, the key is if you've got someone that's experienced in motorcycle litigation, they're going to be able to let you know one way or the other whether or not you've got a viable case or not and how to pursue that case.
And about 30 seconds remaining, but folks out there who love their motorcycles, the overriding advice tonight is enjoy them, just be smart, and everybody else, let's look out for them.
Well, that's right. Visibility, as we talked about, is one of the most significant things we see. And, the statistics just support that 35 to 40% of the people are more likely to have an accident when they're on a motorcycle.
We got to look out for
Good job today.
All right, you too. Good to see you, Josh Wright. Always good to see you as well. We're so grateful for your spending your Sunday nights with us, and we'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.